The hand connected with a sound like a page torn violently from a book, a wet, sharp crack that seemed to silence the indifferent hum of the fluorescent lights in the drab hallway. For a split second there was no pain, only a stunned, ringing quiet. Then came the heat, a blooming supernova of shame and agony on her cheek. She did not scream. She did not cry out. Alara Thorne had learned long ago that her sounds of distress were a currency he spent for his own gratification. So she gave him nothing. She simply stood there, the strap of her tote bag digging into her shoulder, her gaze fixed on a water stain on the wall just past his ear, a blurry brown continent on a map of peeling beige paint. What happens next will change everything, for her, for him, and for the man watching from the end of the hall. Subscribe to see how this unfolds. Alara had been free for exactly 17 days. She counted them like a prisoner marking walls, each day a small, shaky line drawn in the ledger of her new life. Freedom, she was discovering, did not taste like champagne and sunshine. It tasted like stale coffee and instant noodles. It smelled like the damp, vaguely sad scent of her new studio apartment, a place so small she could touch both the kitchenette counter and her bed at the same time. But it was hers. The silence was hers. The solitude was hers. After 5 years of living inside the noise of Marcus Vance's ego, the quiet was a form of grace, a fragile, hollow-boned thing she was terrified of breaking. He broke it. Of course he broke it. He had a master key to every lock she had ever tried to install on her own soul. He had not called. He had not texted. He had simply appeared, a storm front in a bespoke suit, waiting for her outside her building as she returned from a 14-hour shift at the diner. Not her architecture firm. Not the world of sleek lines and impossible cantilevers she had once co-inhabited with him. A diner. The irony was so thick she felt she could choke on it. She, who had designed the award-winning atrium for the Morrison Tower, was now refilling ketchup bottles and memorizing the daily specials. "Alara," he had said, his voice a low purr that had once made her heart flutter and now made her stomach clench. "This little game is over. It's time to come home." She had kept walking. Head up, eyes forward, pretending she was a stranger in a city of strangers, and he was just another piece of urban noise. But Marcus was not accustomed to being ignored. He was a man who existed only in the reflection of other people's attention. His pursuit was not passion. It was a correction of a clerical error. He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a soft, pliable thing he had invented for his own comfort. The real Alara, the one made of steel wire and quiet endurance, had been in there all along, waiting. He followed her into the building, his expensive leather shoes echoing her worn-out flats on the linoleum. He talked the entire way to the elevator, a monologue of their shared history, rewritten in his favor. He spoke of his generosity, his patience, her obligation. He used the word obligation 3 times. He did not use the word love once. The words were a smokescreen, a performance for an invisible audience. He was not trying to win her back. He was trying to repossess an asset. The Obsidian Tower project was faltering. The investors were getting nervous. He needed his ghostwriter, his silent partner, the true architect of his success. He needed her mind, and he was willing to break her body to get it. In the 3rd-floor hallway, under the flickering, unreliable light, she had finally turned. "Marcus, go home." Her voice was quiet, not a plea, but a statement of fact. A geographical designation. You are here. You should be there. The simplicity of it enraged him more than any screaming match could have. It was a dismissal. It rendered him small. And Marcus Vance could not bear to be small. "Don't you dare!" he hissed, his face contorting, the handsome mask slipping to reveal the ugliness beneath. "Don't you dare use that tone with me after everything I've done for you." "What have you done for me?" she asked, a genuine question. The silence that followed was her answer. He had no answer. There was only the taking. The credit he took for her designs, the space he took in their bed, the air he took from every room he entered, that was when he grabbed her arm. His fingers were a vice, his thumb pressing into the delicate bundle of nerves on her inner wrist. "You are coming with me. We have a meeting with the Sterling Group tomorrow. You will be there. You will smile, and you will tell them how brilliant my revised concept is." "Let go of my arm," she said, her voice still unnervingly calm. She was focused on keeping her breathing even, on not giving him the satisfaction of her fear. "You have an obligation," he snarled. See his face close to hers, his breath sour with entitlement. And that led to the slap, the moment his control finally, completely snapped. He drew his hand back, not in a wild swing, but with a deliberate, cold precision that was somehow more terrifying. And he struck her. The sound echoed. Her head snapped to the side. The world went white at the edges. She did not scream. She held herself perfectly still, a statue of defiance in the face of his brutish tantrum. The pain was a grounding thing. It was real. It was proof. This was who he was. Not the charming prodigy the magazines wrote about, but this. A petty tyrant in a hallway, hitting a woman because she would not do his work for him. In the ringing silence, a new sound emerged. Slow, deliberate footsteps from the far end of the hall. Neither of them had noticed the man standing there in the shadows near the stairwell door. He had been there the whole time, watching, listening. He did not rush. He was not performing. He simply moved forward, his presence consuming the space, swallowing the stale air and the lingering violence. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the sickly yellow light and give nothing back. His movements were economical, fluid, without a single wasted motion. He stopped a few feet away. A silent, immovable object dropped into the middle of their chaotic orbit. Marcus turned, startled, his hand still tingling from the impact. He puffed up his chest, ready to deploy his usual brand of belligerent authority. "This is a private matter. Mind your own business." The man's eyes, the color of a winter sky, were not on Marcus. They were on Ilara. They were assessing, not in a predatory way, but with a calm, dispassionate focus, like a master craftsman examining a flawless but damaged piece of work. He noted the red mark blooming on her cheek, the way she held her body rigid, the defiant set of her jaw. He saw her, not the victim, not the hysterical woman. He saw the strength it took to stand there and not shatter. Then his gaze shifted to Marcus. It was not a glare. It was worse. It was a dismissal. It was the look one gives to an insect, a mild annoyance to be brushed away. "Let go of her arm," the man said. His voice was low, steady as iron wrapped in silk. It was not a request. It was a statement of what was about to happen. Marcus, high on his own adrenaline and arrogance, actually laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. "Or what? You'll call the cops?" "She's my wife. She's just a little emotional." The lie was so blatant, so pathetic it hung in the air between them. Ilara flinched. They were not married. They had never been. It was a cage he had often tried to build around her, and she had always refused to step inside. The man in the suit did not react to the lie. He did not engage with the fiction. He simply took another step forward. "She is not your wife," he said, the same calm, level tone. "And you have 3 seconds to remove your hand before my head of security, who is standing in the stairwell behind you, removes it for you." There was a subtle click. The stairwell door, which Marcus had assumed was empty, now held the silhouette of a second, much larger man. Marcus's blood ran cold. The swagger, the bluster, it all evaporated in an instant, so leaving behind the clammy sweat of a coward who had been caught. His hand dropped from Ilara's arm as if it had been burned. The man in the suit did not look at the second man. He did not need to. He had the kind of power that was structural, deep, and quiet. He did not need to shout to be obeyed. The world simply reoriented itself around his will. Marcus, by contrast, had only ever possessed the hollow, performed power of a bully. In the presence of the real thing, he crumpled. "Security," the man said, his gaze still fixed on Marcus. The word was not loud, but it cut through the air with absolute finality. The larger man stepped out of the stairwell. He moved with a professional placidity that was more intimidating than any overt threat. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus tried to shrug it off, a last, pathetic attempt at defiance. The hand did not move. It was like trying to shrug off a building. "Mr. Vance," the security man said, his voice polite, "we're going to take a walk." "You can't do this," Marcus squeaked, his voice pitching high with panic. "I know people. I'll sue. Who the hell do you think you are?" The man in the suit finally looked at him, a flicker of something that might have been mild curiosity in his eyes. "I am Julian Croft, and you are trespassing in my building." He paused, his gaze flicking to Ilara and back. "And you just assaulted one of my tenants." The lie was as smooth and seamless as the silk of his tie. Ilara was not his tenant. She was a subletter in a low-rent unit on the 3rd floor. Julian Croft, she knew, owned the penthouse. The entire top 3 floors, according to building gossip. He lived in a different stratosphere, but in that moment, he claimed her. He wrapped the mantle of his immense, quiet power around her, and it was as disorienting as the slap had been. Marcus was frog-marched towards the stairwell, still sputtering threats and pleas. "Ilara, tell him! Tell him we're together! Ilara!" She did not speak. She did not look at him. She just listened as his voice faded down the concrete stairwell, followed by the heavy, final sound of a fire door closing. And then there was silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles. A heavy, weighted blanket after a long fever. Ilara finally allowed her body to tremble, a fine, violent shudder that ran through her from head to toe. Her legs felt weak. She leaned back against the wall, sliding down into a crouch, her face in her hands. The tears she had refused to give Marcus now came, hot and silent. Julian Croft did not move closer. He gave her space. He stood as a silent sentinel, a pillar of stillness in her swirling chaos. He let her cry. He let the moment be hers, ugly and raw and necessary. Only when the shudders began to subside did he speak. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice still low, but now stripped of its iron edge, leaving only the silk. She shook her head, her face still hidden. "I'm fine." The words were a lie, but they were an old, familiar habit. "No, you are not," he stated again, not as a judgment, but as a simple observation of fact. "But you will be." He crouched down, not so close as to be threatening, but enough to be on her level. He placed a small, cool object on the floor next to her. A bottle of water, its cap already twisted open. "My car is downstairs. It can take you to a hospital, or a hotel, or anywhere else you would prefer to be." She finally looked up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. His face was impassive, but his eyes held a deep, unnerving stillness. She had seen that look before, in boardrooms, on the faces of men who moved markets with a single word. It was the look of absolute control, but there was something else there too, a flicker of recognition. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Why are you doing this?" Julian Croft considered the question for a moment. He was a man who seemed to consider everything, weighing his words before he spent them. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in protecting my investments." He stood up, offering her a hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm, but not confining. To my it was a point of stability in a world that had just been knocked off its axis. "And I believe you are a very significant investment, Miss Thorne." She stared at him, confused. He knew her name. How did he know her name? She took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. The world still felt tilted, unreal. She was an architect who served coffee. He was a billionaire who lived in the sky. Their worlds were not supposed to intersect, let alone collide with this much force. They rode down in his private elevator, a silent wood-paneled box that moved without a whisper. The air was cool and smelled faintly of leather and something clean and expensive. Alara stood in the corner, hugging herself, acutely aware of her rumpled diner uniform, the tear track on her face, the throbbing heat of her cheek. He stood by the control panel, perfectly still, his gaze directed forward. He did not stare. He did not try to make small talk. He granted her the dignity of her own silence. The elevator opened directly into a subterranean garage. It was not the dingy, oil-stained concrete cavern the other residents used. This was a showroom, a pristine, white-lit space filled with a collection of cars that were less vehicles and more works of art. A black sedan, long and sleek as a panther, was waiting, its engine purring softly. A driver in a dark suit stood by the open rear door. Julian gestured for her to get in. She hesitated. This was a line, a boundary. Getting into that car was an act of surrender, of ceding control. Her entire life for the past 17 days had been about reclaiming her own control, inch by painful inch. "I don't need protecting," she said. Oh, the words coming out stronger than she felt. It was the title of a book she was trying to write for herself. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. He watched her for a long moment, seeing the fear and the defiance warring in her eyes. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of understanding. "I know," he said. "This isn't about protection. It's about resources, the right tool for the right job. Right now, the job is getting you out of the blast radius. My car is simply the most efficient tool for that." His use of logic was disarming. He framed it not as a gallant rescue, but as a practical solution to a logistical problem. It was a language she understood. Architecture was about solving problems with grace and efficiency. He was speaking her language. Reluctantly, she ducked her head and slid into the buttery leather of the back seat. The door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, shutting out the world. Julian got in the other side. "Where to, Mr. Croft?" the driver asked, his voice a low monotone. Julian did not answer immediately. He looked at Alara. "The choice is yours, Miss Thorne. A hospital, a hotel, your friend Chloe's apartment on the west side." The fact that he knew her friend's name sent a fresh jolt of alarm through her. This was not a random act of a good Samaritan. This was something else entirely. "How do you know my friend's name?" "I make it my business to know things," he said simply, "especially when they pertain to projects I am invested in." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a slim tablet. He swiped the screen and turned it to face her. And on it was a stunningly rendered image of a skyscraper, a twisting crystalline spire that seemed to defy gravity. It was the Obsidian Tower. Her design. The one Marcus had been butchering with his revisions. "I am the primary investor in the Sterling Group's downtown expansion," Julian said, his voice even. "I have been following the progress of this project for over a year. I have seen the original schematics. They were visionary. The subsequent revisions have been less so. I have suspected for some time that the man taking the credit and the person with the talent were two different people. Tonight, you confirmed my suspicion." Alara stared at the image of her building, her creation, glowing on the screen in the dark, luxurious cocoon of the car. It was the dream she had thought was dead, murdered by Marcus's ego and her own exhaustion. And here it was, being presented to her by the one man who could actually make it real. "He was going to ruin it," she whispered, the words a painful admission. "He was," Julian agreed. "He will not be given the opportunity to do so again." He swiped the screen again, and a legal document appeared. "My team has been preparing this for a week. We are exercising a clause in our contract to remove Vance Architecture as the lead on the project, due to material misrepresentation and failure to meet performance benchmarks." He looked at her. "The position of lead architect is now vacant. I would like you to fill it." It was too much. The slap, the rescue, the car, the tower. Her brain felt like a circuit board that had been hit with a power surge. She was shorting out. I can't. I don't have a firm. I don't have a team. I have a part-time job at a diner." You have a diner uniform and a great deal of untapped potential. He corrected her gently. I have a firm. I have a team. I have an entire floor of office space in my main building, fully staffed and equipped, that is currently unoccupied. He paused. I am not offering you a job, Miss Thorne. I am offering you a company. Your own studio. Fully funded, with a single client and a single project for the first year. Build your tower, as you designed it. No compromises. The offer was so audacious, so far beyond the realm of possibility that she almost laughed. It felt like a dream, and she was afraid she would wake up on the cold floor of her hallway. Why? She asked again, the only word she could manage. Why would you do that for me? It is not for you, he said, and the distinction was crucial. It is for the building. I want that building, Miss Thorne. The one you designed. The one only you can build. Everything else is simply a means to an end. He leaned back against the seat. Now, where would you like to go? We can have your belongings moved from your apartment by morning. You will not have to see it, or him, ever again. A wave of dizzying relief washed over her. The thought of not having to go back to that sad little box, of not having to look over her shoulder for Marcus, was a powerful anesthetic. She thought about her options. A hotel felt anonymous and cold. Chloe would be a comfort, but she didn't want to bring this chaos to her friend's doorstep. There was a third option he had not named, a place of safety. A place to think. You said you had a guest house, she said, testing the words. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was the first hint of warmth she had seen from him. I do, he confirmed. James, he said to the driver, take us home. The next few weeks passed in a surreal haze. Home, for Julian Croft, was not a house, but a compound. A sprawling, modern estate nestled in the hills overlooking the city, shielded from the world by a small army of ancient oak trees and a great deal of discreet technology. The guest house was larger than any apartment Alara had ever lived in, a minimalist masterpiece of glass, steel, and warm wood. It was stocked with food, a closet full of clothes in her size, and a library of art and architecture books that made her heart ache with longing. Julian was true to his word. He gave her space. He was a ghost in her new life, a powerful, unseen force arranging the world for her convenience. Her things arrived, carefully packed. A new laptop and phone appeared on the desk in the study. A contract was delivered by a polite, efficient lawyer. It was everything Julian had promised, a new firm, Thorne Design, with a generous operating budget and complete creative control over the Obsidian Tower project. Her name was the only one on the letterhead. She spent the first few days in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Men like Julian Croft did not do things for free. There was always a price. She walked the sterile, beautiful rooms of the guest house, feeling like a ghost herself. She ate the food, she wore the clothes, but she felt disconnected. A visitor in a life that wasn't hers. She was waiting for the bill. It came in the form of an invitation, a simple, handwritten note on heavy cream cardstock left on her kitchen counter. Dinner, my house, 8 p.m. Julian. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple, architecturally precise black dress. Armor. She walked the stone path that connected the guest house to the main residence, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. This was it, the moment he would tell her what he really wanted. He met her at the door himself. He was not wearing a suit, but a simple cashmere sweater and dark trousers. The casual attire was more disarming than any formal wear. It implied an intimacy that did not exist between them. He led her through rooms that were vast and sparsely furnished, curated with museum-quality art. The house, like the man, was a study in controlled elegance. They ate on a terrace overlooking the city, a glittering carpet of light spread out below them. The meal was simple, perfect. The conversation was stilted at first. She was wary, guarded. He was patient. He did not push. He asked her about her university thesis. He asked her about the architects who inspired her. He asked her about the tower. As she talked about the tower, a change came over her. The caution fell away, replaced by a passionate, articulate fire. She spoke of the way the glass would catch the morning light, the engineering challenges of the cantilevered sky garden, the flow of people through the public spaces. She forgot who she was talking to. She was just an architect speaking the language of her heart. He listened. He truly listened. His focus was absolute. He would ask a question, a sharp, insightful query about load-bearing walls or wind shear that proved he was not just hearing the words, but understanding the concepts behind them. He saw the complex mathematics and the soaring poetry of her vision. In that moment, she felt more seen than she had in 5 years with Marcus. When she finally wound down, embarrassed by her own enthusiasm, she looked at him, bracing for the catch. "This is all very nice, Mr. Croft. The house, the company, the dinner. What is it you want in return?" Julian put down his wine glass. He looked at her, his gaze direct. "I have already told you. I want the building, and I want it to be built by the person who envisioned it. Beyond that, I want nothing." He leaned forward slightly. "Miss Thorne." "Ilara. Do you think so little of your own talent that you cannot believe someone would want to invest in it, without ancillary motive?" The question struck her like a physical blow, because the answer was yes. Marcus had conditioned her to believe her worth was conditional, a commodity to be traded for his approval or affection. The idea that her talent could have intrinsic value, a value that someone like Julian Croft would recognize and pay for, was a foreign concept. "I don't leave because things become complicated," she found herself saying, the words a direct quote from a fight she'd had with Marcus months ago when she'd tried to leave the first time. "I leave when they become dishonest." He nodded slowly. "A commendable policy. So, let us be honest. Marcus Vance is not going to disappear quietly. He is arrogant, and he is wounded. That is a dangerous combination. He will try to sue. He will try to smear your name. He will try to interfere. I can handle him," she said, the reflexive response of a woman used to fighting her own battles. "I have no doubt that you can," Julian said, "but your time and energy are better spent on the tower. Allow me to handle Marcus. Consider it pest control." There was a cold finality in his tone that was terrifying and, to her shame, deeply reassuring. He was not offering to protect her. He was offering to clear a path. A subtle but important distinction. She spent the next month immersed in her work. The studio space he had provided was a designer's dream, a vast, light-filled loft with state-of-the-art equipment and a small, fiercely loyal team of drafters and engineers hand-picked by Julian's firm. Ilara worked with a feverish intensity, pouring all her pain and frustration and hope into the lines and figures on the screen. She was not just designing a building, she was rebuilding herself. Julian remained a distant but constant presence. He never visited the studio. He never called for updates, but she would find her favorite coffee on her desk in the morning. A complex engineering problem would be mysteriously solved overnight by a consultation with a world-renowned expert she hadn't known they'd hired. He was a ghost in the machine of her new life, a silent enabler. They fell into a routine. She would work late, and 2 or 3 nights a week, he would be waiting in his car when she finally emerged, exhausted but exhilarated. They would not go back to the estate. They would go to a small, quiet restaurant. Or sometimes just sit in the car at a scenic overlook and they would talk. About work, about architecture, about everything but the one thing that hung in the air between them. One evening, she found him in the studio's kitchen, poring over a set of her blueprints. It was the first time he had come to her space. She froze in the doorway, feeling an odd sense of intrusion and a strange flutter of pleasure. "The HVAC system for the sublevels is inefficient," he said without looking up. "You're losing 4% thermal efficiency through that northern duct run." She walked over and looked at the plans. He was right. It was a minor detail, something no one but she and the lead engineer would ever notice. "How did you know that?" "My first company designed industrial cooling systems," he said, finally looking up at her. "I still remember the math." He was standing close, closer than he had ever been. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap. "You're tired." "I'm fine," she said automatically. "No," he said, his voice soft. "You are working too hard. You have nothing to prove, Alara. The job is already yours." "I'm not trying to prove anything to you," she retorted a little too sharply. "I'm trying to prove it to myself." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Then you are the only one left who needs convincing." Just as he predicted, Marcus did not go quietly. The legal notices started arriving. Frivolous lawsuits claiming intellectual property theft. Cease and desist letters sent to her suppliers. It was a campaign of nuisance designed to bleed her dry, to exhaust her will. She would hand the letters to Julian's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who seemed perpetually unimpressed, and try to forget about them. But they were a constant, low-level hum of anxiety in the back of her mind. Marcus grew bolder. He began calling the junior staff, trying to poach them, trying to gather intel. He left rambling, sometimes threatening, voicemails on her new phone, a number he should not have had. Each transgression was met with a swift, invisible response from Julian's camp. A supplier Marcus leaned on would suddenly lose their other contracts. A lawyer he hired would abruptly recuse themselves, citing conflicts of interest. Julian was playing a different game, on a different board, and he was winning so quietly Marcus didn't even know he was losing yet. The breaking point came in the form of a gala. The annual Obsidian Ball, the city's premier event for architecture and development. Julian's company was the main sponsor. He invited her to attend as his guest. "I don't do galas," she said immediately. The thought of the fake smiles, the glad-handing, the inevitable questions filled her with dread. "You are the architect of the most anticipated building project in a decade," Julian stated. "It would be strange if you were not there. Besides," he added, a glint in his eye, "I have it on good authority that Marcus Vance has managed to secure a ticket. He believes he is crashing the party to confront you. In reality, he is walking into a trap he does not know exists." "I don't need you to fight my battles for me, Julian," she said, the words feeling tired and thin even to her. "I know," he said, his voice patient, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "I am not fighting your battle. I am ending a war you should never have had to fight. I am clearing the board. Will you allow me to do that?" She looked at him, at the quiet certainty in his eyes, the absolute confidence. It was not arrogance, like Marcus's. It was competence. It was the calm assurance of a man who had already accounted for every variable and knew the outcome. She thought about the last 5 years, the constant, grinding exhaustion of fighting, of protecting her ideas, her spirit, her sanity. The thought of letting someone else carry that weight, even for one night, was intoxicating. "Fine," she said, "but I'm wearing my own dress." The dress was emerald green silk, a slash of defiant color in a sea of black and white. It moved like water when she walked, a silent, liquid statement. When Julian saw her at the bottom of the stairs in the main house, he actually stopped. For the first time since she had met him, his composure fractured. He just stared, his face a mask of stunned appreciation. "You are incandescent," he finally managed to say, his voice a little rough. "It's just a dress, Julian," she said, but she felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the silk. The gala was exactly as awful as she had imagined, and yet, with Julian by her side, it was bearable. He was a shield, not by being aggressive or possessive, but by his sheer, immovable presence. Conversations would start, probing questions would be aimed at her, and he would deflect them with a quiet word, a subtle shift in his posture, turning the conversation back to the questioner. He created a pocket of stillness for her in the middle of the storm. She saw Marcus across the room long before he saw her. He was holding court with a group of younger, sycophantic architects, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked thinner, his suit a little less perfect, a frantic, hunted energy about him. He was losing, and he was starting to know it. Then his eyes found her. He saw her, standing next to Julian Croft, looking radiant and untouchable. He saw her in her emerald dress, a queen in a court that was no longer his. His face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, rage, and then a terrifying, predatory focus. He started moving towards her, a shark scenting blood in the water. "He's coming," she said, her voice tight. "I know," Julian said, his hand finding the small of her back. It was not a possessive gesture. It was a grounding one, a quiet message: "I am here." "Let him." Marcus shouldered his way through the crowd, his face a mask of righteous fury. He ignored Julian completely, his eyes locked on Alara. "There you are," he slurred, grabbing her arm. The same grip. It was a replay of the hallway, but this time the stage was bigger, the lights brighter. "We need to talk." "Let go of my arm, Marcus," she said, her voice cold and clear, ringing out in the sudden lull in conversation around them. "You don't get to talk to me like that," he snarled, his grip tightening. "You owe me. Everything you have, I gave you. That tower is mine. Your career is mine. You are mine." The words, the sheer, breathtaking arrogance of them, hung in the suddenly silent ballroom. Everyone was watching. This was the moment. The public humiliation he had intended for her. But then Julian spoke. His voice was not loud. He did not need to raise it. It cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Sit down, Marcus." Marcus finally turned to face him, a sneer on his face. "Stay out of this, Croft. This is between me and my associate." "No," Julian said, taking a deliberate step forward, placing himself between Marcus and Alara. He was a wall of calm, dark blue silk. "This is between me and you, and it is over." He took a phone from his pocket, the screen already lit. "This is a confirmation of a wire transfer from my primary holding company, sent at 9 o'clock this morning. It finalized my acquisition of a controlling interest in Sterling National Bank. Your bank, I believe. The one that holds the mortgage on your office building, your apartment, and the rather substantial line of credit you've been using to finance your lifestyle." Marcus's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "I don't bluff," Julian stated. "I purchase." He swiped the screen. "This is the deed to the building on 54th Street, the one that houses Vance Architecture. As of this afternoon, I am your landlord, and I am afraid we will not be renewing your lease." He swiped again. "These are the resignations of your 3 senior partners who have all accepted rather generous positions at a new firm. A firm I own." He looked up from the phone, his eyes boring into Marcus. "Every single person you have ever relied on, every institution you have ever leaned on, every dollar you have ever borrowed, now reports to me." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a public execution. Marcus stared at him, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. He was a puppet whose strings had just been cut. "You see, Marcus," Julian continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet audible to everyone in the cavernous room. "You made a fatal miscalculation. You thought Alara was your most valuable asset. You were wrong. She was your only asset. And you were not worthy of her. You came here tonight to ruin her, to claim credit for her genius. Instead, you will bear witness to it." Julian turned to the crowd, his voice rising to a clear, commanding tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I had intended to make this announcement later in the evening, but the moment seems to have presented itself. My company, Croft Industries, is proud to be the primary partner in the Obsidian Tower project. But the credit for its vision, its brilliance, and its execution belongs to one person." He turned and gestured to Alara, who was standing, stunned, in the circle of light he had created for her. "I would like to introduce you to Alara Thorne, the founder of Thorne Design, and the true architect of the Obsidian Tower." A smattering of applause started, then grew into a roar. It was a wave of sound, of validation, of recognition. It washed over her, cleansing her. People she had admired from afar were looking at her with respect. The faces of her new team, scattered in the crowd, were beaming with pride. She looked past them all, at Marcus. He had fallen to his knees. Not dramatically. He had just folded. His body had given up. He was on the floor of the most important ballroom in the city, a broken man in a bespoke suit, sobbing. Not because he was sorry, because he was caught. Some security, the same discreet, efficient men from the hallway, materialized and helped him to his feet, guiding his boneless, shambling form out of the room and out of her life. Later, they stood on a private balcony, the cool night air a balm on her flushed skin. The noise of the party was a distant murmur. Below them, the city lights blazed, a galaxy of human endeavor. In the distance, the construction site of the obsidian tower was a dark void, punctuated by the single red light of a crane. Her tower. "He's gone," she said. It was not a question. "He is," Julian confirmed. "His assets are frozen. His credit is ruined. His reputation is non-existent. He will not trouble you again." She turned to him, the emerald silk of her dress whispering in the quiet. She looked at his calm, strong face, even the face of the man who had systematically and ruthlessly dismantled her past so she could have a future. "I told you," she said softly, a small smile playing on her lips, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "I don't need protecting." He returned the smile, and it transformed his face, chasing away the last of the shadows. "I know," he said, his voice full of a warmth she was just beginning to understand. "I never thought you did." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. It felt right. It felt like coming home. "I was just clearing the way." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and together they looked out at the city, at the dark space where her dream was waiting to be built. The weight she had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a feeling she could barely name. It was not happiness, not yet. It was something quieter, more profound. It was peace. It was the slow, steady peace of finding safety, of being seen, of finally being correctly placed in her own life. Some people will take your silence for weakness, your grace for submission. They will see your quiet competence and mistake it for a resource to be plundered. They build their hollow empires on the foundations of your uncredited genius. But strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet endurance of a woman who refuses to break. And sometimes power is not the arrogant roar of a tyrant, but the steady, patient hand of a man who sees her true worth and simply clears the path for her to build her own. Drop a green heart in the comments if you know Ilara Thorne deserved to win. We all know she did. If this story moved you, please hit that like button right now. It helps us know what kind of stories you want to see. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. Hit that button and ring the bell so you never miss what comes next. The story of Ilara and Julian is just beginning, and the construction of the Obsidian Tower is coming, with all new complications. You won't want to miss it.